Hello and welcome once again to High Flyer English Chill Out. I'm your host Steve Ellis, and this podcast is about helping advanced English learners bridge the gap between being accurate and being fluent. Now, accuracy is a solid foundation. It's knowing the right grammar, vocabulary and pronunciation. But here's the thing. Accuracy alone doesn't make you fluent. You might speak with perfect grammar, but if your speech feels slow, unnatural, or overly formal, it's like driving a shiny car with no fuel. It looks great, but it's not going anywhere. Fluency is what makes English sound effortless and natural. It's about speaking in chunks, the pre-assembled phrases and expressions that native speakers use instinctively. It's not just about knowing the rules, it's about using the language in a way that flows. So what's a chunk? Well, at the heart of fluency, it's the concept of lexical chunks. These are the building blocks of fluent speech, and they come in several flavors. First of all, there's fixed expressions. Fixed expressions are completely set in stone. You can't change a single word without them sounding strange. They're often used to serve a clear communicative function. For example, "You've got to be kidding me. I couldn't care less. At the end of the day," or fixed expressions. "I'd rather not. I don't mind." These expressions are fixed because they act as a whole unit, and altering them by saying "you've got to be joking me" instead of "you've got to be joking with me" or "kidding me" breaks their naturalness. They just sound odd. Semi-fixed expressions, on the other hand, are templates. They're partly fixed, they provide structure, but you can tweak them to fit your needs. Think of them as a blank canvas. For example, "it's not worth," and then you add a verb and ing. "It's not worth worrying about it. It's not worth going there. It's not worth watching it." Another one. "I'll give you a quick what? I'll give you a quick update. I'll give you a quick rundown." Another. "If it hadn't been for," followed by a noun and a clause. "If it hadn't been for the rain, we'd have made it on time. If it hadn't been for Jim, we'd never have completed the project. Good old Jim." These are incredibly powerful because they allow you to adapt your speech while keeping the flow intact. Having dealt with fixed expressions and semi-fixed expressions, let's move on to idiomatic chunks. And first we have collocations. These are words that naturally go together, forming patterns that sound right to native speakers. They can range from simple pairs to longer combinations. So simple pairs. We'd say heavy rain. We don't say hard rain. That would sound very strange. We reach a unanimous decision. We face mounting pressure. We take full responsibility. Now, what's tricky about collocations is that learners often substitute words that seem logical. For example, a learner might say "make responsibility" instead of "take responsibility." Well, that's a very elementary mistake, isn't it? Let's consider phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are a huge part of fluency because they're so common in everyday English. They come from our Anglo-Saxon roots. They're combinations of a verb and one or more particles. Up, out, of, in. The prepositions or adverbs often have idiomatic meanings. So we call off a meeting. Bring up is to mention. He brought up such a point at the meeting. To run out of. To have none left. You can run out of petrol on the motorway. Oh, we've run out of tea. Oh my God, that sounds very British. To be without tea. Can you go down to the shop and get some more? Oh, don't worry. I drink coffee more than tea, even though I am British. Phrasal verbs are both versatile and challenging. There's so many of the damn things. And they're difficult because the meanings aren't always obvious from the individual words. For instance, pick up could mean to learn something quickly, or even to catch a cold. So, he picked up French very quickly. Oh dear, I think I've picked up a cold. I've probably got it from Francis. And take the phrasal verb to put up with. Well, it means to tolerate, and it's usually used, or often used anyway, in a negative way. Kids, keep the noise down. I can't put up with it. Or maybe you can't put up with the noise the neighbours are making upstairs. Oi, keep the noise down. And then we have to put up. To put up someone. Supposing someone says, oh, when you're in town, I can put you up for the night. Put you up. Simply means I can give you accommodation. I can put you up for the night. You'll have to sleep on the sofa, but yeah, you'll be comfortable. It's better than paying for a hotel. And finally, idioms. These are fixed expressions with meanings that aren't literal. They add colour and personality to your speech, but they can be very tricky for learners. Some examples. A blessing in disguise. Something good that seems bad at first. Throw in the towel. This comes from boxing, where a boxer's manager would throw a towel into the ring to signify that his boxer had had enough and he wanted to stop the fight. To get cold feet means to suddenly feel nervous or hesitant. Let me stress that it's important to learn idioms that are actually useful. I'll give you a good example here. A well-known idiom, it's raining cats and dogs, meaning it's raining very heavily. We never use it. And it's one which drives me mad. There's another idiom, drives me mad. Sends me crazy. Raining cats and dogs. No, we just don't use it. We'd probably say it's pouring down, or it's pelting down, or it's throwing down. Or amongst friends, we'd most likely say it's pissing down. There you are. Sounds a bit rude, but yeah, well, sometimes we are. But we wouldn't use it's raining cats and dogs. Sounds so old-fashioned. I always think of this one as an example because when I first started teaching and I was working in Turkey, the principal of the school, who couldn't otherwise speak a word of English, knew only this one phrase, it's raining cats and dogs. So whenever it rained, he'd grab hold of me, he'd collar me and say, Steve, it is raining cats and dogs. It used to drive me mad. He found it highly entertaining, so every time it was raining, I used to try to avoid him. I said he used to collar me. That's another idiom. To collar me, you know where your collar is. This is the collar of my jacket, or it's the top of your shirt. It suggests that someone's getting hold of you by the collar. But when used idiomatically, it doesn't mean physically getting hold of you. It means they're getting your attention. They're grabbing hold of your attention. So let's talk about accuracy versus fluency. Why doesn't accuracy guarantee fluency? Well, let's break it down. A learner might produce grammatically perfect sentences like, I'm feeling really frustrated. Whereas a native English speaker might say, I feel at the end of my tether. Or a learner might say, I don't think I'll go to the party tonight. A native English speaker might say, I think I'll give the party a miss. So fluency is about using natural phrasing, adapting to real life context and sounding effortless. And this is where lexical chunks come in. Instead of constructing sentences word by word, fluent speakers pull entire chunks from memory. It's faster, it's more efficient, it's more native-like. Let's just talk briefly about the lexical approach. The lexical approach was a book and an idea, if you like, by a guy called Michael Lewis and popularized by him. And it emphasizes that language is made up of chunks, not just grammar. The lexical chunks we've just talked about, collocations, phrasal verbs, well, most native speakers don't even know what they are. They don't know what you're referring to because we've been brought up using them. An idiom, they might think, kind of old proverbs or something. And yet we use them all the time without thinking. Much harder when you're not a native speaker and you're learning English. I didn't learn what phrasal verbs were until I actually started teaching English. I didn't even learn them on my training course. Collocations we covered briefly, but not in any depth. So I ended up having to do a lot of research myself. End up doing. There you are. There's a phrasal verb. And what we were taught at school as a native speaker were parts of speech, adjectives, noun, verbs, and so on. Maybe adjectival phrases and clauses. And we use something called parsing sentences, where we split them up into the different constituents. I must have been a bit of a nerd, really, because I quite liked doing it. It was useful for writing essays, maybe, but not for conversational fluency. Do you know, we didn't even learn verb tenses. And this is probably true in your own language as well. I didn't learn what the past simple was, or the present perfect, and the other tenses until I was learning French at school. We just had no need to learn them at school. So, wrapping it all up, fluency is about much more than accuracy. It's about mastering lexical chunks, fixed expressions, semi-fixed expressions, collocations, phrasal verbs, and idioms, and using them naturally in real-world conversations. As we continue with this podcast, the other episodes, we'll be diving deeper into these chunks. We'll look in more depth at fixed and semi-fixed expressions and collocations and phrasal verbs and idioms, exploring how you can use them in context to help you build up a toolkit, a repertoire, if you like, for advanced English. But along the way, we'll keep things relaxed. Plenty of practical examples and more than a touch of humour. So throughout, we'll chill out. So stay tuned and make fluent natural English your superpower. This is Steve signing off for now. Bye-bye. See you later.